Three, two, one. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank you, Caroline, for coming on the show. I know you're very busy, but we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So I was gonna ask you, where are you located?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, which
Um,
it's pretty rainy here today. Welcome
uh,
to our summers of hot, humid, feeling like you're in a rainforest weather.
yeah, I'm not far from you. I've been to Atlanta a few times. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, so we kind of get similar weather. Usually, whatever you guys get, we get too. So.
Right.
Yeah. How is everything with like COVID and all that in Atlanta right now?
So, to be honest with you, COVID here hasn't been too impactful because we were actually one of the last states to lock down and one of
Hmm.
the first states to open up. So, for me, actually, last year when it happened, my husband and I had just gotten married the day that Trump announced everything was shutting down. So, 314. And through that whole time, like we still had access to a gym. Things were pretty much normal for the most part. And I was just entering a competition prep. So from then up till now, it feels almost like a blur as far as what's happened with COVID. I did get COVID
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
I recovered pretty quickly over it. The
Yeah.
longest symptom for me was the loss of taste and smell.
Hmm.
But, now most places are back to normal.
Yeah.
Um, that's mostly because the vaccination rate is supposedly higher, but
Hmm.
that's a
Yeah.
whole nother discussion we
Yeah.
could talk
Yeah.
about at some other point.
Sure. Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I was thinking of it from the standpoint of training. A lot of places kind of shut down. People had very limited access to training. Our here in Nashville it was like limited capacity, and of course, with the fear of getting COVID, like I decided to just kind of make a little gym at home. But you never had to go through that training at the gym the entire time.
We did a few like outdoor workouts
Hmm.
when there was literally like a week of time
Yeah.
that we didn't have a gym. So
So it
it worked
didn't
out well for us.
didn't interrupt your prep at all.
Nope. And
Awesome.
at that point, like I had just started prep,
Hmm.
so it wasn't like too big of a deal for me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it makes sense. So how did you find this love and interest for like fitness, in general?
So I grew up always active, and I actually was non-athletic growing up. I would try out for sports teams and either wouldn't make it or I'd be last group in the pick, and I'm like, this isn't for me. So I was on the farm, grew up raising cattle and raising row crops, so always out and about. And when I got to college, I went to Ohio State, was a major in agriculture communication. So my
Mhm.
background, nothing to do with fitness. And by the time I graduated, I moved out to Nebraska for my first ever sales job. Well, if anyone's familiar with sales, you're eating out for lunch, you're going out to dinners, having drinks with customers, XYZ to do business. And at that time, I wasn't really super aware of it until a couple months in. I put on 20 pounds after
Oh,
graduating college, and I hadn't put on anything during college. So to me, that was a red flag because a lot of my family has health issues. So I was like, I need to kind of figure out something for me.
mm,
And my last year at Ohio State, I had taken a women's strength and health course, and it was basically around like powerlifting, physique competitions, bodybuilding, just to kind of learn the basics. And I reached back out to that gal and was like, I'm kind of looking to do a show. Can you coach me? She's like, yeah. So I ended up my first ever competition prep for 17 weeks. This was in 2015 and dropped like 22 or 23 pounds. I went on stage like 119, 120 pounds. I'm
wow.
5'4", so I was tiny. It was like bikini tiny.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did figure, and at that point, I was like, "Is this really something I want to do?" But it was like the effect of getting on stage and experiencing the show day experience was what really made me fall in love with the sport. So I was like, "All right, I'm going to keep doing this." So I ended up taking like 5 months off, even though it's not really an off season.
Mhm.
Now I know that, and decided to do a show that next spring, which qualified me for a national show. And I ended up doing Junior USA's in 2016.
Mhm.
Well, went to Junior USA's, and I didn't really have any expectations. I didn't know what it was going to be like. Get there, I'm like, all right, I got some work to do. And I was last call outs, but that experience alone was what made me realize I want a long term longevity in this sport. I want to make the commitment to grow my physique, to put on muscle, and have a look that I can be proud of and is attainable year round. So after that, I was going through some transitions with work. I met my now husband and we were dating online. Ended up moving from Columbus, Ohio down to Atlanta, Georgia. In between there, I moved back to Ohio,
Mhm.
and then I moved down to Atlanta. And throughout all that, my hormones were kind of messed up. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I hadn't had a period for 2.5 years. And even growing up, like I had short periods, irregular periods here and there, but doctors would always tell me, oh, you're fine, you're healthy. Why don't we just put you on birth control? And I was like, nah, that's not really for me. And through that, I recognized that there was a missing piece and I had to figure it out. So I started doing my own research. I started learning more about nutrition and macros and how stress plays a role in the female body and how the hormone imbalances can be affected by a lot of different factors. And then I was finally able to regain a period. Went on with John Meadows, mountain
Mhm.
dog, who unfortunately just passed away,
Right.
and had been with him until now.
Mhm.
And he helped me regain my period, and we kind of monitored my hormones from there. But
Yeah.
even since then, that's been my passion: is how can we integrate the passion for the sport for women while also being smart about how we compete and how we live our lives if we have goals outside of the stage.
Right. Yeah. That hormone imbalance, especially for women, it affects men as well. But like with women, it's such a huge component because if it regulates so many aspects of like the female like body and emotional state and everything like that. So it's if it's not in the right condition, like it can really, hurt you, immediately and down the road together. So yeah, that's a scary thing to have to go through. You said that you always kind of had like some issues with like having periods and things of that nature. Did the competing exacerbate those issues? Is that what essentially happened?
Absolutely. That's what we figured out down the road was, for me, I'm a high stressor. And here's the easy saying for people to remember is women's stress, it's in their heads, and when men stress, it's in their hearts. So
Mhm.
that's where our conditions will come from. If a woman is stressing, it's all up here. When our pituitary gland and our hypothalamus get stressed, they start communicating different things to the hormones and to the body. So that's where you start to see amenorrhea, lost periods. You start to see gut issues. You start to see hormone imbalances, XYZ, adrenal fatigue.
Mhm.
With men, with their stress, that's where you start to see cardiovascular issues. And on their labs, a lot of times it's with their cholesterol and their heart. So that's really the easiest way to think about it. And for women, we're so complex to begin with. But if we can, most of the time, I'm a type A person and I've always known that. But it took the realization of, oh, I can't train 7 days a week and do hit training 6 days a week and expect to have a period and be healthy and have kids down the road. And I'm
Mhm.
only 29 years old.
Right,
And
right.
I know women younger than me who are already having these types of problems.
Yeah, I mean, I've had several girls on the show that post comp, they've had some horrible experiences with their hormones. I mean, I think one girl I just talked to not that long ago, also in the wellness division, after her first comp, she didn't know what she was doing, had a terrible coach, which is also another huge problem in the fitness industry, and bounced back 70 pounds. She went from like the 120s to 200. Crazy,
Wow.
crazy. And I mean, to imagine the health ramifications of that. Do you feel like that can be combated with just nutrition and the proper like lifestyle, or you feel like maybe like medication is needed, in these kind of situations where your hormones are imbalanced?
So I'm a firm believer in there's no one way approach
Mhm.
for every person. And as a functional health coach, I've gotten certificates for holistic health. I've done courses and mentorship and worked with companies on the functional side. It's a happy blend, usually, is what I find works most often.
Mhm.
However, to your point, if we can't get the root cause solved and resolved, usually the stress piece, the rest is not going to fix itself. And I've had several, I can't even tell you how many conversations I've had with women, whether they're lifestyle or competition. And it's like, if there's something triggering you that's making you stress eat, or it's making you not eat, or it's making you want to work out every time that you have a fight with someone, you have to figure it out because you're literally on repeat. This cycle, that stress cycle, is the number one killer for
Yeah.
people. And so, with that example of like a competition client, you know, I never say that there's a bad coach, but there had to have been miscommunication with that coach as to why she would put on that much weight coming out of show, whether she didn't have a plan, whether that coach didn't communicate the plan or be attentive to that client to make sure she was adhering to the
Yeah.
plan, something like that. And I'll be transparent. The first couple shows that I did coming out of it, we rebound. Like as women, we're like, oh my God, I can finally eat. Give me all
Mhm.
of the food. And if you don't have that mental fortitude, even though you have it during prep, it's like a chemical reaction in the brain, especially when we have a piece of sugar.
Mhm.
The sugar is literally as addictive as drugs to a woman who has been depleted, training, and her mind is literally to mush at this point if she's on low fats, which most of the time to get to a
Right.
stage lean physique, you're on low fats too. So you aren't thinking properly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into it. And I think there is definitely a place for pharmaceutical medical use drugs to go into it, but I try and do things as holistically and naturally as possible.
Sure, sure. No, this guy definitely was a bad coach. He not only did he whatever the miscommunication there was, then he stopped like returning their communication. So and there's a lot of that. You hear it around, and you encounter people that have gone into relationships with coaches like that never ended up well. But yeah, that's a big thing now with like, especially for men. I don't know how common it is for women, like hormone replacement and stuff. Like finally like people have figured out, okay, it's okay to use hormones to like balance yourself out. Before, people would just kind of attribute it to other things. But stress, to your point, stress is incredibly effective at causing you to do certain things. Like, for example, one thing I know that is in society, stress is really underappreciated. Like, people don't really give stress the power that it actually has. Like, they just think of it as like, oh, it's just stress. Oh, I'm stressed out. But it has so many like varying effects on your body that you wouldn't even be able to like really understand it. I remember I had a family member who was having vertigo, like issues with vertigo, and it was really coming from stress. And the doctor said that you have to address like your trigger of stress, because you can't eliminate it, but you have to be able to, like, how you receive it makes the difference. And so I think that's kind of like a big thing, right? You can't eliminate stress. You can't put yourself in a bubble. It's almost impossible to do that. But how you take it in is huge. Like, that makes a big difference. And I find that the people that have the mentality of receiving stress in a more balanced and reasonable way always end up a little better. And then, like I said, my family member, there, anxiety all the time, worrying about everything all the time, and it causes all these like issues down the line. So
Hmm. And I'll just carry on to that. One of the things that I see as the biggest issue in society is women in general are taking on more of the male roles, specifically in the career piece.
mhm.
And so when they're trying to adhere to this male dominant society, which is every 24 hours, you need to be productive, effective, and get results.
Right.
A woman's day-to-day timeline is not the same as a man's, primarily because of hormones, and
Mhm.
that we have a monthly fluctuation of our hormones. And if we continue the way that this path is going, that's why we see more women that are overweight and more women that are having these health issues, and women that maybe don't go back to their careers after having children because they felt so overwhelmed and stressed in the workplace that they're like, why am I going to go back to that? And
Yeah.
there's going to be, I think, more societal issues coming from that. But at the end of the day, we can only correct that if we stand up to it and make a say for it. And I had been in corporate for over 5 years. I
Mhm.
recently left corporate now, so I'm coaching full time, working with my husband for his
Oh, wow.
coaching. So this is my full time now.
Mhm.
And being able to help women and men, I have some male clients too, understand that the stress piece, that foundational stress, even putting it on yourself and thinking, oh, I got to make X number of dollars this week, you got to think of it in a different way, that it's more about the abundance and it's more about the, this is what I have now. I have these resources so that I can make X dollars, and
Right.
doing it in the mind. It's more
Right.
in the mind than it is in the environment itself, which can play a part.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I definitely think that, and this is kind of like a tangent into a whole different topic, but but I definitely think that the. Let me start off by saying that I think that women and men are equal in like how they should be treated. However, there's obvious differences between men and women, and sometimes when you don't like you put everybody from a physical standpoint on the same level, like expectations and so forth, like there's issues that come from that. And while societally we might ignore them and kind of put them off to the side, and there might be outliers, like some women that are able to handle it, and outside of the majority, um, that kind of skews people's viewpoint, and like you said, I think we're starting to see like problems if you really have a keen eye, but in general, like people aren't paying attention to that, and that's part of the problem, right?
So you actually brought up a great point I'd love to touch on that relates back to
Mhm.
bodybuilding,
Sure.
is the amount of stress that a woman is able to handle. So when it comes to a training and a dieting and bodybuilding perspective, a female can technically train harder than a male
Hmm.
and be able to manage that stress. A female body is meant to handle stress because
Mhm.
we're supposed to reproduce and we're supposed to be able to fight off elements. And when it comes to that training piece, I've been reading studies on it. A male can lift more weight, yes, but as far as the intensity, a
Hmm.
female can handle a higher intensity of training than a male, which is why you see a lot of women going into CrossFit or bodybuilding, because it is such a high intensity sport environment,
Yeah.
and they do well. And as long as you can recover, and as long as your hormones are in a good spot, you can do really well. So every woman's threshold too, we have a different level of stress that our body gets used to. So when I was telling you I lost my period the first time I ever did a prep, that was 16 weeks out. Now I had my period this season up until I think 6 weeks out. And so
Wow.
my body has slowly adapted over the years to stress as well. And I know a lot of women, there's some women that keep their period all through prep. There's some that will get it back really fast. I got my
Mhm.
period back within 4 weeks, which was the fastest I've ever gotten it back. So
Mhm.
the more in tune we get with our bodies, too, that's where we're going to be able to help more women have more longevity in the sport.
Right.
And that's where I'm seeing the biggest concern right now. I don't know if you heard the news about the woman bodybuilder that passed away this weekend.
I did not. What happened?
So essentially, her coach had prescribed her, she's on anabolics
Hmm.
for women's bodybuilding, which
Right.
is common,
Right.
and prescribed her diuretics for peak week.
Mm.
However, he prescribed three different diuretics, and there's no need for that. So that was a coaching flaw, number one. But number two, did he run blood work? Did he know where she was at as far
Probably
as her
not.
health numbers go?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff, like, I can't even tell you how many women I hear that are in their teens and early 20s starting on cycles, and I'm like, I really hope that you're having somebody monitor you, and some of them are under good coaches that do that, but then there's
Yeah.
some that are under these no-name coaches who don't know how to read labs, they don't understand blood work, and they don't understand PCT, and it's just like it's going for a whirlwind of disaster because the thyroid is the biggest one impacted most of the time for women. My thyroid has impacted my natural shows that I did, but even now, like, is enhanced. Like,
Mhm.
you can have good hormone panels and you can have bad hormone panels.
Yeah.
So finding that balance, I'm hearing so many horror stories of so much gear that women are on, from bikini all the way up to women's physique. And people think that bikini and wellness don't use gear. That's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they think that women are all getting this way just because they've trained for 10 years, which is part of it. But then again, they do have additional help.
Right. Yeah. That's actually one of the girls that I talked to, and the topic was specifically on her drug use and the hormone issues that she had post. Um, most people would be completely surprised. I think even people in the bodybuilding world are surprised that bikini women are using drugs. And because you look at them, they're so small, they're so tiny, but you can't think of it as a size thing. It's not a matter of size. There's, you know, we have such a variety of drugs that have been developed to do different things, that it's one of those things where it's like there's a level of use in almost every facet of athletics, and even non-athletics, just for aesthetics, right? Like, people take them just for aesthetics all the time. So it's really like kind of, I don't want to say mesmerizing, but just like amazing to think of a girl that's 120 and like 119 pounds, that it's taking, testosterone or something like that. But it happens all the time, like you said. And do you feel like while you do want to monitor and try to be careful, there is an inherent risk, especially with the more you take? What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like there's a threshold of the amount that you should take? Is there certain things that women should avoid? Like I said, there's a whole variety of drugs available to bodybuilding and athletics.
Right. So this is definitely a deep discussion topic.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I've actually been putting some stuff together for a course on this specifically to help educate people on what could be considered a safer route
Mhm.
versus a detrimental route. And we touched on this earlier in the conversation, is every person's bio individual. So a 5 milligram 8 week cycle of Anavar for one girl can be fine, but for the next girl could cause facial hair and acne. You don't know. A girl taking Ostarine for 8 weeks could have no issues. For the next girl, could have blood pressure issues and acne. You never
Mhm.
know. And to your point, the biggest issue I see is women going from cycle to cycle to cycle, not taking time off, and they just keep adding on, or even if they're using the same dosage, the more you put that into the body, that's where you can start to have that manifestation of the viralization. And I'll even speak to my own experience. I've only done 4 anabolic cycles in my entire bodybuilding career.
Mhm.
And this season, I noticed viralization in my voice, and I've
Mhm.
never had that. And I take very low dosages of
Mhm.
everything. I'm monitored. My husband does blood work and stuff. My coach did blood work, and we made sure everything was good. And it was just more of my body is responsive to it.
Mhm.
And I'm a high androgen woman in general. So even if I stayed natural, I produce more androgens
Mhm.
naturally.
Mhm.
So that's where getting to know yourself before you even start a cycle, you need to have that understanding. Do you aromatize naturally? Do you have this certain pathway of estrogen that can lead to more estrogen dominance issues? Do you have this pathway for the androgens that can lead to more acne. Like it all varies. And I mean, there's a handful of drugs I would never recommend to a woman, but I literally heard the other day a gal, bikini and figure, on Tren, and both turned pro.
You're kidding.
But nope, I'm dead
Oh my
serious.
goodness.
And the problem is the judges reward it.
Mhm.
The judges know that women are taking stuff. They know it. These women could not look this hard without taking stuff.
Right.
And so until there is a shift in the way that the stage presentation and the judging happens, they're going to keep doing it because a lot of these girls just want to win. And
Right.
shoot, even husbands will be like, just put her on it. I just want her to win.
Yeah.
And that's ignorance in my mind.
Yeah, I think you become misled by your physique, right? You start taking that stuff, you look really amazing, and then it's like you forget about everything else. Everything else becomes just kind of like nonsense, but you're like, but I look this good. Why wouldn't I want to, stay on this or take this? And I think that's also part of, well, first, before I go into that, I think what you're describing as far as like checking yourself and making sure everything's okay and taking blood work and all that, you're describing an individual that's responsible. You're describing somebody that is taking initiative to make sure that they're doing things appropriately. Most people are not doing that. They're just like, give me whatever so I can look this way, and they'll just take it. And that's a real big problem because, well, you'll see things such as in the female arena, how everyone is getting bigger and harder across the board. You see bikini girls now that look like figure girls a few years ago and such. So it's and I do attribute that. No way our genetics have become that great over the last few years as human beings, like as a whole. So you might have a couple outliers, but everyone is across the board getting that way. So it's obvious like that there's some, they're stepping up a notch,
Hmm.
with regard to that. That's what I think is happening.
Yep. And there are natural organizations too. So obviously, if someone wants to do a natural bodybuilding competition, they can. The only caveat is you can't get it to the Olympia or have an IFBB Pro card if
Right.
you go that way. And that's what a lot of people want, is they want that title.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a deep subject with a lot of different areas in the weeds that is that is could take hours to even talk about. But as far as your competitions, so I noticed that you're in the wellness division, but you started off, you said, in figure. Look, what made you decide to go into wellness?
So it was actually an easy switch for me. In 2019, did Junior USA's. I placed fourth overall in my age group, or my height group. So I was class B, and asked for feedback. And feedback was, Caroline, you have great physique. We love your structure. I actually, by one judge, was noted to have Olympia level structure. And I was like, awesome. And they're like, the only issue is you either have to grow your entire upper body or your legs have to come down. And I was like, well, my legs are one of my strong suits, so I don't know what I'm going to do from here. But then it was in September of that year that they announced wellness coming out. So right then and there, my coach and I put together a plan, and I started training intentionally to grow for wellness. So I was doing legs 4 days a week, some weeks. And then obviously went into it 2020 season when COVID and everything happened, but I hit 3 shows back to back to back. I won the Mel Harbor Classic overall wellness champion. And then I did Junior USA's. I placed fourth. And then I went up to Pittsburgh at North Americans and I placed third. So the feedback, I mean, my conditioning was on point last year. Feedback was come back, grow your glutes. So I took a little bit of time off, and that's when we discovered my hormones were pretty much bottomed out
Mm.
in December of 2020, and started prep this year, I think at the end of April, and I didn't let my body have long enough time off.
Mm.
So this prep this year was a grind. I for about 4 weeks, no weight change, just didn't budge. And
Wow.
so we had to get more extreme in the diet. My coach is not about out cardioing me to death. He would change a diet more than anything, and finally started dropping weight I dropped, I think, a total of 18 pounds in prep,
Yeah.
but on stage, like, I wasn't lean enough that day, and now it's fine. I ended up in second callouts, eighth overall in
Mhm.
Class B, which was 24 women. So it's the biggest wellness class they've ever had for a national show, apparently.
Right,
But
right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely growing. It's definitely growing. It's in the States. And what's interesting, excuse me, what's interesting is that people think of wellness as being such a new division, but in reality, like it's been around for quite some time, for many, many years, in some of the Hispanic countries and over in Europe. So I believe that it's going to become, if it's not already, to be honest, it's going to become the most popular division in, that we have, because it's got the benefits of having femininity, but also, large enough muscle, basically what people want to see on a woman. And yeah, and I think that that's the way to go. Definitely playing to your strengths makes a difference, right? It's always interesting to me how, like, when someone has a really good body part and they have to cut it down to fit a class, and it's counterintuitive because you're training, just forget bodybuilding, forget stepping on stage. You train and lift weights to become like more muscular, harder, whatever the case, to improve. So to go to the gym and then bring something down by not training it almost mentally seems counterintuitive to what, like, we do as bodybuilders. So yeah, so I assume that's kind of like what made you decide to go ahead and go into wellness. You're like, hey, I'm just going to play towards my strengths. I got good legs, I'm not giving that up.
yeah, absolutely. And I actually had a shoulder injury that had transpired from trying to grow my upper body so much in
Mm-mm.
figure. And it turned out I actually got a capsular contracture in my breast implant. So
Wow.
I had to get those redone too. Because it was just so painful. I couldn't train upper body. It was terrible.
Oh, I
So,
heard I heard about those. So how did you notice that happened? Did it happen acutely, like during training, or did you notice later on?
so I can't pinpoint if it was an exact workout that did it, but I was training shoulders, back, chest 3 days a week for a
Mm,
few months, and all of a sudden one day, like, I went to, like, lift up my arm, and I just felt the shoot of pain all the way down into the chest cavity, and I couldn't even hold a steering wheel. I vividly remember, like, there were days where I literally had to just keep my arm down because I couldn't hold the steering wheel.
mm,
um, and so I'd had pain before from that implant because it was under the muscle,
mhm,
and my other doctor I gotten them from is out in Kansas City, so I couldn't go back to him, but I found one in Atlanta here. We didn't do an MRI or anything to look at it, but he was like, he, checked them, and he's like, "Yeah, I think it's encapsulated, it's contractured."
mhm,
So he's like, "We can remove it and put in new implants." And that's what I ended up doing in December of 2020.
mm. Still under the muscle?
No, I'm over now.
Oh,
I won't honestly, I don't recommend under the muscle for a woman who's doing bodybuilding because of the way it affects the muscle build.
right.
Um, and I've seen so many women get deformed implants over time because of their training.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, right? Because if it's under, then you're training that muscle. It starts pushing it
Yeah.
different ways and different directions. Yeah, that's crazy. So you've been through some difficulties. How did it play on you mentally? Like after having, like that issue, then having the issue with hormones. Was there a level of like depression, or did you push forward? And, like, how did that affect you in your mind? Excuse me.
So I would definitely admit to having some depression from those instances. But the biggest thing for me is just trying to get recentered in what my purpose is and knowing that every single experience I have, it's not good or bad, but it's experience that builds into my story that I can help people through. And specifically because of the breast augmentation stuff, I put together a YouTube series on it.
Mm,
And I still get women reaching out to me to this day on Instagram being like, "Hey, I just saw your YouTube videos on your breast augmentations," and they'll like do a follow-up question or whatever. And I'm glad to answer those questions because when I was trying to figure out what to do about my implants, there were no resources. And that's the same thing going on now with my hormones. But I think we're finally seeing more exposure about female health and the hormone connection and stress connection. But at that time, like there was nothing for me. So I was just trying to learn on my own, reading, research, going to doctors. And
right.
a lot of people, you see online personas and you think, "Oh, they must be so happy all the time. They must be so strong. They never face challenges." And it's not true. And that's one thing I try to portray on my social media is that I'm a real person and I go through hardships and I do have depression or sad moments or what have you. And I get a lot of women reaching out because they appreciate my transparency and you don't
Yeah.
see it. And I don't ever want to be one of those Instagram famous women who just post physique photos of them on stage or model shoots and puts motivational quotes. That's not who I am. I want to be real and raw to help women get through the tough stuff or keep pushing when they're in those seasons of success. Because usually, when we're in a season of success, it can continue to grow as long as we take care of ourselves through that process, too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the problem, right? Is that not enough people are talking about their experiences. Because when I was coming up and a little younger, and I had situations come up that I wanted answers for, that it wasn't something you would ask a doctor, and it was really hard to find like answers from other bodybuilders and other people involved in like the fitness industry. For example, like I had to reach out to somebody that I listened to on YouTube, and they're pretty, popular and a big mind, and they thankfully they responded to my answers. But if they didn't, I don't know what I would have done, because or my questions, I should say, I wouldn't have had any kind of resource. And and part of that is that people that are running into these issues, they're not putting it out there because they want to have that persona, like you said, online, of just everything being perfect and everything being great, and just how lean they are all year round, which is not the case. And so but if it works on people that don't understand, what this social media slash fitness industry, like how it works,
Mhm.
and I'm thinking more of people like young girls that are coming up, or young men that are getting into fitness. I remember my false beliefs, and I can only imagine what people are now believing. It's a big problem.
Yeah. And I think there's an area we can do better at, specifically on YouTube or TikTok or IG Reels, because that's where the young people are going. They don't necessarily want to sit here and listen to an hour podcast, but maybe they'll go look at a 30-second to a 1 minute reel talking about, "Oh, I went from this stage look to my current look and I'm healthier now. And
Mhm.
here's why." And that's something I need to get better at is I'm trying to learn TikTok so I can start using that platform more. But there's ways that we can help educate these younger kids and young adults that want to get into being healthier and being fit without the ramifications that can come from overdoing it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough because it's almost like you have this giant in front of you. The problem is a giant and you're just one person. But if you can motivate others to do something similar to you, then that can domino, into at least helping some. Maybe not everybody, but at least some. You'll have a win there.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what are your plans for the foreseeable future as far as comps are concerned?
So that's a good question. And the past couple of days, I've still been processing because the funeral was this Saturday for John. So
Yeah.
we went up to Ohio and saw some friends that were also there and had a phone call yesterday with a friend who also I'm considering to coach me. And At this point, I don't think I'm competing until maybe late next year at the earliest. I honestly just want to take time to grow and be healthy. And my this is my philosophy. I'm not like most of these women that want to go stage to stage to stage
Mhm.
because I want to grow my physique enough that when I step on stage next, they're going to be like, wow,
Yeah.
she earned this, earn the pro card, and then hit a pro show and be a competitive pro.
Right.
I don't just want to have a title. I want to be competitive if I'm going to do it. So for me, there's no rush. I mean, I'm in the season of hustle right now with my business and my husband's business, and we've been traveling to client shows and doing a lot of stuff. So as long as I can keep eating well and I'm working on the hormone piece right now, I'm gonna get my. I just got blood work back after a month post show. I'm gonna run another set here in a couple of weeks, see where it's at, and as long as
Mhm.
I'm in a good spot, keep trending forward. And my goal is to work up to 2,400 calories clean eating this off season. So we'll see if I can get
Yeah,
there.
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that situation with John is it was really sad. Um, do we know what exactly happened? I know I read some things in the early stages, and I don't know if they knew at that time. I know he had some kind of either heart attack or some kind of issue with that like a year or two ago, and then recovered and looked like everything was fine. And then all of a sudden to get this news is really sad. Do you know any more about that the whole situation?
Yeah, so he had a heart attack a little over a year ago, and
Mhm.
at that point, like, he was lucky to be alive.
Right.
They had a I forget if it was restructuring in the heart or what it was, but his heart was working at, like, 20 to 25% capacity, and they had improved it to about 30 to 35%. And so we just saw him. He came down to Columbus for the Chicago Pro at the end of July, and healthiest we've ever seen him. Like super upbeat, looked really good in the face, like
Yeah.
training, and he still trained hard. Like, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
So it was kind of out of the blue. He passed in his sleep, and they said it was a pulmonary embolism. So
Yeah.
he had a pre-existing autoimmune disease that
Mhm.
caused blood clotting, and so the only thing we were actually thinking about was, could it have been the flight and traveling that triggered a blood clot to happen that did
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, very well could be because I mean, if I read about his autoimmune disease that with the compromised heart plus the traveling, it maybe it created like a perfect storm. That's so sad, and especially for his wife and kids. Um, yeah, that's rough. And it's hard to like really talk about it because there's not really like it's hard to find the words, for it. But yeah, just to pivot to a brighter, subject matter, your coaching, yours and your husband's, like, what do you got? Can you kind of tell me about that?
Sure. So David and I coach separately actually. He's
Hmm.
with Fit Body Fusion and coaches. We both do very similar focus for hormone balance, physique development, aesthetic development, gut health. But like he and I, our philosophy is the same, that if you're going to work with one of us, we're focusing on your long term health, not
Yeah.
just a short term goal to be on stage. And honestly, half of my clients are lifestyle clients. They don't even want to compete, they just want to be healthy, look good.
Hmm.
And my belief is we work on the inside to make your outside aesthetically look good too, so that your
Yeah.
hard work that you do on the outside is going to be reflected. Because if we don't work on the stuff on the inside, not just your gut, your hormones, adrenals, but also the mindset, your mentality, the
Hmm.
stress, then we're able to see the outward results happen.
Right.
So everything's customized month by month or 6 month contracts. Um, Depends on the person, what their needs are. But, I'm just trying to help more people. And I'm actually creating some ebooks and some courses
Oh,
specifically
nice.
for women because I know some people can't afford coaching. And I get that. I've been there. So, want to make a few more resources that are more accessible. And I've got a YouTube channel too, so I'm trying to put out free resources on YouTube as well.
Great, great. So what would be the best way, and I will go ahead and wind up. I know I'm tracking the time here. What would be the best way for them to contact you if they wanted to kind of, uh, get your expertise?
Absolutely. So I do offer consults as well. So if someone just wanted to talk to me for an hour about a topic, I can do that too. My email is probably going to be the best way just because I'm trying to not be on social media all the time. That's going to be strongsweetcaroline@gmail.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as Strong Sweet Caroline.
Awesome. And yeah, I definitely know that because I messaged you and you're like, just send it to my email. I don't want to check Instagram. That's hilarious. Okay. Well, hey, again, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for telling your story and your viewpoint on fitness and nutrition, and helping people really to bring attention to the issues that are at hand. So, again, thank you so much, and you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Armin. You too.
Take care.